Michael Jackson, the one and only king of pop. I mean, we're talking about a guy whose influence in the music industry is just off the charts. From selling hundreds of millions of albums to making fans literally faint at the sight of him, MJ was on a whole different level. He didn't stop there. Nope, he took things to the next level by diving into the world of music catalogs. I'm talking about buying up catalogs of other artists like it's nobody's business. And guess what? We're about to dive deep into all of that in this video. So get ready, because we're about to uncover what MJ bought, what his estate still owns, and the current state of his own legendary catalog. It's the early 80s. Michael Jackson is in the midst of crafting his masterpiece, Thriller. Now, during this journey, he teams up with none other than the legendary Paul McCartney from the Beatles. Can you imagine the creative energy flowing in that room? While they're jamming out, Paul drops some serious knowledge on MJ. He's like, hey, ever heard about this crazy lucrative business of buying up publishing rights for music catalogs? And guess what? Paul knows what he's talking about because he's been in the game trying to manage his own Beatles catalog for years. But here's where it gets juicy. Back in the day, John Lennon and Paul were the proud owners of the Beatles publishing rights, raking in royalties left and right. But then, in 1969, due to some poor management decisions, their royalties end up in the hands of British outfit Associated Television, also known as ATV. Paul McCartney, he felt that sting for years, dreaming of owning his music again. Fast forward to the 80s, Paul starts building his own portfolio by buying up other artists' catalogs. And you know what he tells MJ in 1982? He spills the beans, sharing his journey and planting the seed for MJ's own epic venture into the world of music catalogs. Crazy, right? In 1982, Paul McCartney's advice to Michael Jackson would come back to haunt him. Fast forward to 1985, and the Beatles catalog is up for sale again. This time, it's a big deal. Everyone knows its value. Associated Television is selling the rights to over 4,000 songs, including a whopping 251 from the Beatles. It's a gold mine. Naturally, Paul McCartney and John Lennon's wife are ready to bid. But they are not alone. Heavy hitters from all over are throwing millions into the ring. And guess who's among them? Yep, you guessed it. Michael Jackson, the same guy Paul advised just a few years back about buying music catalogs. Michael Jackson ends up outbidding Paul McCartney and John Lennon's wife for the Beatles catalog. He drops a whopping $47.5 million to seal the deal. So imagine if that deal went down today, that $47.5 million from 1985. It's worth a jaw-dropping $131 million now. That's right in line with the crazy high valuations we're seeing in today's market. But here's the thing. When we talk about music catalogs today, we're not just looking at artists like Justin Timberlake, Dr. Dre, or Justin Bieber. Sure, they're big names with valuable catalogs, no doubt. But when it comes to the Beatles, it's a whole different level of legendary. Their catalog is like a treasure trove of music history, and owning it carries even more weight and prestige in today's world than it did back in '85. My guess? Today that number would be through the roof. We're talking billions. Remember, back in '85, Michael Jackson snagged ATV, including the Beatles catalog, for $47.5 million. Now, fast forward to today, where that investment is worth a staggering $131 million. But let's be real, if that deal went down now, we'd be looking at a whole different ballpark in terms of value. Now, how did Paul McCartney feel about all this? Well, let's just say he wasn't exactly thrilled. I mean, imagine giving someone advice and then they turn around and snatch up something you wanted. Understandably, he was pretty upset. He even said it felt like someone buying the rug they're standing on. On the other hand, John Lennon's wife had a different take. She was actually happy that Michael owned it, instead of some faceless corporation. But here's the twist. This whole ordeal caused a major rift between the two legendary artists. So what happened next? Does Michael Jackson's estate still own the Beatles catalog 10 years down the line? Let's find out. Michael Jackson decides to sell 50% of his ownership in the Beatles catalog to Sony for a jaw-dropping $110 million. This move creates Sony ATV Publishing, later rebranded as Sony Music Publishing. Fast forward a bit, and within just 10 years, MJ turns a massive profit selling half of ATV for double what he paid. By 1995, he's pocketed a cool $47.5 million. But get this, he holds onto the other 50% and continues to rake in earnings for years to come. Even after his passing, he still owns a chunk of that legendary catalog. Finally, in 2016, the Jackson estate sells the remaining 50% stake to Sony for a whopping $750 million. And get this, the Beatles catalog alone is now valued at over $1 billion. Now that's some serious money, folks. And in 2016, its true value really came to light. Forget about royalties for a sec. Just from those two sales alone, Michael Jackson and his estate made over $797 million. Paul McCartney probably should have taken MJ seriously back in the 80s when he joked about buying the Beatles catalog. Because look at what happened just a few years later. He goes and snags it, making hundreds of millions in the process. Here's another story you might know. Michael Jackson's revenge on Eminem. In 2004, Eminem was already a huge success, reaching a massive audience with his music. He drops his studio album Encore, featuring the track Just Lose It as the lead single. But here's the twist. The song contains some disses aimed at Michael Jackson, which didn't sit well with him. Eminem apologizes, but the damage is done. Fast forward 3 years, and MJ sees his chance for payback. Michael Jackson and his company, Sony ATV, still holding that 50% ownership, make a big move. They drop $370 million to buy famous music publishing company. With this deal, Sony ATV now owns a massive catalog of soundtracks from hit movies and TV shows like Top Gun and Footloose, along with a few music artists' catalogs, including Eminem's. Yep, you heard that right. MJ now owns the song that dissed him, and every track Eminem's ever dropped. And keep in mind, this is back in 2007, when Eminem was smashing records left and right. So owning his catalog? That's a cash cow for MJ and Sony, cashing in royalties for years to come. Even after Michael Jackson passed away in 2009, Eminem's music catalog eventually returned back to him in 2016. I guess the moral of this story is to be careful who you diss, especially if they have the money to buy your life's work. Now, let's talk about the other music catalogs MJ owned. When he acquired the Beatles catalog by purchasing ATV, he gained ownership of 4,000 songs. And when he became co-owner of Sony ATV, that opened up even more opportunities. Over the years, he added catalogs from artists like Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, Whitney Houston, and many more to his impressive collection. Owning such a massive publishing company like Sony put millions in Michael Jackson's pockets. When he bought Famous Music in 2007, he wasn't just getting Eminem's catalog, he also bought both Akon's, Shakira's, and a few others. Plus, MJ had his own publishing company, My Jack Music, where he owned some Elvis songs, as confirmed by his ex-wife Lisa Presley. He also had select songs by Ray Charles. With these different outlets through Sony ATV, Famous Music, or My Jack, MJ acquired thousands of catalogs, deepening his portfolio and making millions. What about Michael Jackson's own catalog? Does he still own it? Well, even after the estate sold off other catalogs he owned for nearly $1 billion, his own music stayed put. It's still under his publishing company, My Jack Music. They've been teaming up with Sony to manage this iconic catalog through an administrator deal. Sony Music Group just made a huge deal. They bought half of Michael Jackson's music collection, including his songs and recordings. This big agreement is worth over $1.2 billion, maybe even $1.5 billion. Sony is paying at least $600 million for their part of MJ's music. This is a big deal in the music world, and people are wondering what's next for Michael Jackson's music. Michael Jackson's catalog isn't the only one involved. Insiders say the deal also includes songs from his My Jack publishing catalog. That's a 250 tracks from the Sly and the Family Stone catalog, and classics from artists like Jerry Lee Lewis, Jackie Wilson, Curtis Mayfield, Ray Charles, Percy Sledge, and Dion. But here's something to know. A lot of Michael Jackson fans aren't happy about this. MJ didn't have a good relationship with Sony back in the early 2000s, so selling his catalog to them isn't sitting well with some of his biggest fans. The big question here is whether the Michael Jackson estate should sell every part of the catalog at all. Personally, I think selling 50% is okay, but selling the whole thing would be too much. This way, they get some cash up front while still owning a share of the legendary catalog, which will keep paying off in the long run. So where are we now with Michael Jackson's catalog? Well, it's valued at around $1.2 billion in total, with the estate owning half of it. Plus, next year, when the Michael Jackson biopic is released, the estate stands to earn even more. In conclusion, Michael Jackson owned thousands of catalogs, some of which he personally selected for his portfolio, like those of the Beatles or Eminem. However, he also acquired many catalogs simply by being in the right position, such as co-owning Sony ATV for decades and acquiring various publishing companies looking to sell. Although his estate no longer owns many of these catalogs, they have already received over $700 million from music that he owned but wasn't even his. If you had Michael Jackson's music catalog, what would you do? Would you hold on to it to earn royalties, or would you go for a big cash payout, maybe even in the billions? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Thanks for watching and have a great day.